We think of these three kinds of conversations, and as we were talking earlier, you said we kind of move a bit of a roller coaster through the practical, the emotional, the social. For someone who is in a sales role,
Yeah.
yeah, we're talking about connecting. Like if you're going to get somebody to buy from you, you need to be focused on connection, not your talking points.
Yeah.
What would you say to them in those unique roles? Anybody who's got to sell, it could be a pitch, could be an executive, but how would you take these three types of conversations and what you've learned and say, all right, practically speaking, if I was going to get on a whiteboard and you're getting ready to go in, like they got you, Coach Charles,
Right.
5 minutes before they go into a big pitch, what can you give them today that is like, okay, I get that, and I think I can. Is that too simple of a setup?
No, not at all. In fact, there's a chapter in Super Communicators
Yeah.
about a CIA officer.
Yeah.
And this guy wanted to be a CIA officer his whole life. He gets hired. He gets sent to Europe. And he's like the worst CIA officer on earth. He's trying to recruit overseas spies. And he'll go into embassy parties. And people will say things like, I know you're trying to recruit me to be a spy. Get away from me immediately. And so this guy had this experience where he was trying to recruit this young woman who worked in the foreign service in a Middle Eastern country. And he's trying for months, and she keeps on saying, I don't even want to talk to you. I don't like you. And he convinces her to have one more dinner with him. And during this dinner, he's thinking to himself, okay, how am I going to sell her? How am I going to be a salesman? How am I going to convince her to become a spy for the CIA? And he's thinking about it, and he's like, I got nothing. Like, I've tried all the tricks in my bag. Nothing has worked. And then during dinner, he actually remembers this thing that had happened before he joined the CIA. He had gone to work for his dad selling metal joists. And he was a salesman, and he was a terrible salesman. But he went into this one meeting with this woman who was the CEO of a small company, and her kid was playing next to the desk. And she's on the phone when he gets in, and he waits till she's off the phone. He starts this pitch, and she says, thanks for your pitch. I really appreciate it. And then she's had a day, so she just starts unloading. She starts saying, it's just so hard being a working mom. Like, my kid's here, and it's hard to be like a boss and a mom at the same time. And she kind of talks for just 3 or 4 minutes, just talking about her life. And this guy, Jim Lawler, he's like 27 years old. He has no idea what to say, right? This adult has just told them about his life, told him about their life, and he's just totally overwhelmed. And so he just says yeah, that sounds really hard. My dad, he hired both me and my brother's a much better salesman than I am. And so every time I go over to dinner at my parents' house, it's just terrible. It's just I feel awful about myself. And then she says, it's been a nice conversation. Thanks so much. Doesn't order anything. And he walks away being like, I'm the worst salesman on earth. And she calls 2 weeks later and she says, yeah, I'd like to give you this order. And it's the biggest order of his career. And he says, why are you doing this? I don't feel
I
like
just confessed to you.
Yeah, I don't feel like I did a
doing.
good job. And she said, no, but I felt like we had a connection. I feel like we understand each other. And he's thinking about that experience as he's talking to this young woman that he's trying to recruit. And he just decides to be totally honest with her. And he says, look, you're about to fly home to your country, and I know you're really disappointed that you couldn't figure out things here in Europe about being a better version of yourself. And I understand that because I'm about to get fired. And all I've ever wanted to do is work for the CIA. And they're going to send me home. And I know what it's like to be disappointed in yourself. And she's listening, and she starts crying, and he reaches across the table. He's like, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to make you cry. I'm not trying to recruit you. I just said, and she says, no. I think I understand for the first time what you've been trying to tell me. I think I can help you. And she goes on to be the best recruit in the Middle East that the CIA has for 20 years.
Wow.
And the reason why he realizes is because he wasn't trying to sell her. He wasn't trying to pitch her. He was trying to be authentic with her. And when we're authentic with someone else, they become able to listen to us. So I'd say for those salesmen that are going into that pitch, the first thing you can do is before you get into your pitch, be your authentic self. And that might mean sharing something that seems a little unusual for a salesman to share. It might mean talking about your family or your experiences or why you're passionate about this product if you are.
It's got to be some level of vulnerability, correct?
Yeah,
I mean, can we be authentic outside of being vulnerable?
No. And I think most people misunderstand what vulnerability is because we think of vulnerability as I got to cry on your shoulder or tell you all about my mom, right? That's not vulnerability. Vulnerability is a very specific thing that happens in our brain. When I say something to you that you could judge, it makes me feel vulnerable. Now, I might not actually care about your judgment. I might tell you I like Star Trek more than Star Wars. And you think that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard because Luke Skywalker is better than Captain Kirk.
Right.
But I don't care. I'm just telling you, but the act
Right.
of telling you something that you could judge makes me feel vulnerable.
Hmm.
And when, instead of judging, you respond with acceptance or with a vulnerability of your own, telling me that you like Deep Space Nine more than Star Trek, suddenly we feel closer to each other. Even though we might not agree with each other, we feel closer because we've given the person the opportunity to judge and they haven't used that against us.
How does a leader take what we've just heard there and say, okay, now I've got to speak to many. I've got to speak to my entire team. We're going to make a pivot. Maybe our stock price has been down. Our profits are off. We are in a place of turmoil or we are in a place of the unknown and they're casting vision. How do they take what you've just been talking about, what you've been researching, and make sure that they're truly vulnerable and authentic when that seems like the absolute most horrifying thing a leader can do?
Seems like you're walking on a tightrope and now you're like suddenly like swaying from side to side by choice, right?
Yeah, because you just said, say something that someone could judge you on. Well, if we're talking about Star Trek and Star Wars, stakes are low.
Right.
But now the stakes are high.
Yeah.
Take us there.
So let me start by saying the wrong way to do it. The wrong way to do it is one of two things. Either to come in when you're not confident and just project nothing but confidence. Right? If you've thought a lot about this decision and you're like, look, this is the right decision because I think there's an 80% chance it's going to work. And you come in and you say, this is the only decision possible. This is fantastic. If any of you are worrying about this, don't worry at all. Everything that you're feeling, you don't got to feel it. That's not going to work, right? That's not going to be authentic. And more importantly, you're not showing people you're listening to them. Instead, you're trying to just bowl them over. The other thing that's a really bad idea is to show vulnerability about something you're not actually vulnerable about, right? If you get up and you tell a story about your kid and it's not something you feel, but you really want to have a story about your kid to connect with people, people are going to know, right? They're going to see through that. Or if you say, we have to do layoffs and I really thought about it and I cried last night about these layoffs. And if you're not really a crier, everyone's going to be like, this jerk, like he's rubbing salt in the wound.
There
right?
was a famous story, the CEO of Better.com.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, that was the name of his company. And he did this at his kitchen table and faux cried. It was the worst.
It was
it was major news.
It was terrible. So those are the wrong things to do. What's the right thing to do? The right thing to do is to talk about your own journey, right? Look, everyone here knows that this company is going through a rough patch. And I'm sure many of you are worried that we might have to do layoffs. I worry about that and I want to prevent that. And so I sat down and I went through all the possible things that we could do. Here's the plan that I think is best. And let me explain why I think it's best. And if you're worried about it, if you have objections, I want to hear them. But then I want us to disagree and to commit because we need one plan going forward. And I'm going to be as authentic with you as I can. And I want you to be authentic with me. And part of my authenticity is to say, I believe in this plan. That doesn't mean that your worries aren't legitimate, but I believe in this plan. We have worked so hard on this plan. I think it can work if we all get behind it. And let me explain to you why. That's so much more authentic, right? And the truth of the matter is, everyone knows that when a company is going through a rough patch, it's not the fault of any one person. It's not the fault of the CEO. It's the fault of fate. It just happens. Every company has rough patches. And it's how you behave during that rough patch that determines whether you're a real leader or not.